Hey there, welcome to another episode of Penetrate Radio. I am here today with Layla Matthews, and we are going to talk about power dynamics. Power dynamics was a big part of the Penetrate program that Layla and I put on because we taught about the power dynamic within the coaching relationship, because that was our coach training program. But power dynamics are so much more than, they're so important in every relationship that we have, and they are a key piece to understanding our unconscious beliefs, behaviors, just what is happening in our unconscious world. Because a lot of times, most of us don't even notice them. We don't even realize what the dynamics are that we're in. And a lot of times in relationships, if you look at them from the lens of the power dynamic, you can uncover a lot of where conflict is happening or what is sort of bothering you about a relationship. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, and I love this topic. I love teaching about power dynamics in Penetrate. And I also think it's really relevant to the work that we're doing ongoing in Dominion. In Penetrate, we were teaching people to be coaches. And so we taught on two different kind of frameworks of power dynamics. So one, we were having people think about the kink dynamic or the kink sort of polarity of dom versus sub. And what people's misconceptions about that are, some like misuses of dommy energy, misuses of subby energy, misunderstandings of those, and also then correct, energetically appropriate, responsible inhabiting of those roles is, I think, worth talking about. And then we also shared about the Cartman's drama triangle, which includes the 3 points of victim, perpetrator, and rescuer. And while these are separate schemas for different kinds of power dynamics, what Lucy was saying is so true that often we can find ourselves in relationship unconsciously participating in these schemas. And our unconscious participation is often what is causing yuckiness, and bringing it to consciousness or clarifying our misunderstandings about those unconscious schemas can be really, really, dare I say, enlightening.
Yeah, and I would love to just right off the jump here say that one of the big features of the drama triangle is that everyone on the drama triangle ends up a victim. So wherever you enter the drama triangle, if you enter as a rescuer, if you enter as a perpetrator, if you enter as a victim, you always become the victim. So anytime you engage with those dynamics with people, you end up becoming a victim. And the reason why we sort of like it's a little bit tricky because as soon as you start thinking in terms of the drama triangle, it's hard to it's hard to not get swept up in it. It's a very sticky thing, but and kind of the idea that where we're coming from, let's just say the stance that I have is that for myself at least, I tend to want to avoid becoming a victim. I prefer to be not a victim. I prefer to feel more empowered in my life. And so I tend to want to, as much as I can, avoid the drama triangle. And having said that, it is very hard. We're people. And so we end up getting caught up, swept up in drama and these roles of wanting to help people and doing things that people don't like and feeling victimized by people. And it's sort of inevitable. So I just want to put that out there. Nobody's perfectly able to avoid the drama triangle, I don't think. And it's also extremely helpful to have an understanding of how it works and also how it relates to power dynamics too. I could also talk about the misunderstandings in the sub-dom thing, sort of a higher level, but we could also just go from there.
Yeah, in some ways, I feel like the dom sub polarity is a cleaner, more self generating. The Cartman drama triangle also has a healed version. So I think maybe we should touch on that because I think we can talk maybe about the shadow of these. I think it's quite easy to see in the Cartman shadow triangle of the victim, perpetrator, rescuer. The inversion of that is the creator, the coach, and the challenger. And so the victim becomes the creator, the persecutor becomes the challenger, and the rescuer becomes the coach. And that's a functional dynamic of interpersonal relationship that's sort of generative, upward spiral. Whereas I think, as you so clearly pointed out, the victim, persecutor, rescuer triangle is a downward spiral towards victimhood and everyone feeling victimized and everyone feeling hurt and there is someone to blame. The shadow and the, healed version. Do we want to talk about some of the sort of shadowy ways that doming and subbing shows up? Some of the healed versions? Well, first of all, I think it's very obvious that immature dom energy, or the misconception of the dom energy, is that a dom is synonymous with a bully. So that the idea is that the dom is somebody who just pushes other people around, tells other people what to do, has utter disregard for others. And then the sub then is seen as the victim of the bully. And maybe in kink, and obviously in the kink space, we're getting off on that. People are consenting to that. And I think the consent piece is what changes things, but sometimes there isn't good consent. Sometimes it is sloppy. Sometimes people are seeking their own pleasure at the expense of others, which is bad kink. Right? That's bad playing. Maybe that's the whole problem with the world, is that some people are enjoying at other people's expense. And if we could learn to stop doing that, then we could all have fun playing together. But anyway, so then the sub is just the victim of the bully. And this leads to a very disempowered thing. And you can see that this is basically clearly a persecutor and a victim. And then somebody's got to rescue that situation or bad things are going to be done. Anyway, the more healed understanding of dom sub dynamics is that there is the one who does and the one who receives, or the one on whose behalf it is done. And when the dom is the person who has more agency, more leadership, more, I don't know if I want to say vision, but just follow through or active energy to make it happen, if they are in a positive and self-nourishing relationship with the sub, then the things that the dom is doing are for the enrichment, the pleasure of, the support of, the love of, the care of, the titillation of, whatever it is, of the sub. And the sub's job is to humbly receive that as much as possible, because it was their idea and it is their will actually being done for them by the dom. And good doms is an archetype that takes pleasure in seeing the pleasure of another, or gets sensation from the sensation of another, whereas the sub is the one who's just raw experiencing sensation.
Exactly. And the thing is that what I think is really profound for a lot of people is when you start to look at each and every one of your relationships and realize that these dom sub dynamics happen in every single interaction that you have. There is some dom sub relationship occurring. The power dynamics are present whether you want to acknowledge them or notice them or not. And a lot of times when we're struggling in relationships or when we're having conflict, there is an undercurrent of there can be some disagreement that is usually unconscious about who's in the dom versus sub role, or how those roles are being played out. And
or what
also
does it mean, and how do we view people who are in those roles?
Well, yes, that's a big part of it too. Exactly. And then also the idea of consent. We might find ourselves in sub dynamics that we don't feel we consented to. And then this sort of brings us over to the drama triangle, because how do we resolve that? I just want to give a quick answer here without going into victimhood, is with clear communication and good boundaries, right? And that's a big part of how you move from that drama triangle to the empowerment triangle. So, but there's also a big piece, even being able to sort of see what is going on. Once you start to notice the victim triangle and the power dynamics, you can see how we often we think we need to save somebody, or we think that this person did something that was bad and wrong to us. And the empowered sort of response to that is to communicate clearly, to set boundaries. And this is a big thing that Layla and I have talked about in our programs that hasn't come up in a while, but boundaries are something that we are in charge of ourselves. It's not something that you can demand other people to respect your boundaries. You are responsible for holding your boundaries. And if you don't understand that, you will always get stuck on the drama triangle, because you'll be expecting other people to rescue you. You'll be expecting other people to take care of you and to dom you without you communicating and holding your own position.
Well, and you'll be seeing other people as persecuting you and harming you and being wrong to you. And then the world is full of only people who can help you or hurt you, and yourself can't really do anything. That ends up in a very disempowered place. One of the ways that I want to give a more concrete example of how I see these power dynamics showing up in our unconscious and therefore playing out as unrest or dysfunction in our relationships. So one place that I see this playing out really clearly, and I think this is a pretty common dynamic, is between children and step parents, or children and parents, where like the dynamic between usually the biological parent and the kid is like pretty stable. And then a step parent often comes in and sees the child taking more power than that step parent is comfortable with. I see this a lot with like stepdads and boys, right? You know what I'm talking about, children.
Yes, I definitely.
Where like there's a parent who feels the child has too much power, and the other parent is like, I don't know what you're talking about. This is just a kid, right? This is a kid. So what are you talking about? And this is not to say that there are not unhealthy dynamics and unhealthy behaviors and things that are out of control, but sometimes it's really just a matter of perception. And I really think that what is going on there is any number of things, but I'm going to like list some things that I would imagine might be going on in the unconscious of people who are struggling in that situation. So one might be imagining that the kid is the dom because the kid is like always getting what they want, or the kid's needs are being prioritized, or like there's focus on like doing for the child. And so that, oh, this kid is like controlling the situation. In truth, that is a child who has a need, and whatever parent is doing for the child is actually the dom. You're not subbing to your bratty child. You are, as the parent, always the dom. So I think sometimes in that dynamic, there's a perception of I'm the sub now to this child who is doming me. I think that's uncomfortable because I think it's really an inversion of truth where adults are, I think, just factually, legally, financially, physically, emotionally, almost in every way more powerful than a child.
And this is just an illustration of the fact that the dom can definitely give. A good dom like gives gifts and takes care of their sub and cares about their well-being. So that is part of the role of a dom, a good dom.
Yeah, serving,
nice dom.
serving. Right, but it feels yucky when you imagine that your kid is bossing you around and you are their servant. That feels yucky. That would clearly make anyone miserable. I would hate to feel I was the slave to a child.
Right. And if that was how it was going, that would be a dysfunctional dom sub relationship if the kid was just bossing the adult around. But as you said, and I think this is a good example too, because the adult is always the dom, because the adult has ultimate power over the child. Like the ability
I said, experientially, financially, legally, in every way, the adult clearly has more power. Which is, I think, why I like this example, because like in other situations, it can be a little bit more muddy. And so we have to like kind of decide for ourselves where we want to land in a power dynamic. And it can be more fluid and there isn't really a right answer. But I think with parents and kids, and I think that's also why that inverted dynamic where we start imagining that there's a child who's running the show and they are the dom and they are the bully and they're in control and we are the parents, we're helpless to their controlling demeanor, that feels so bad. It's so bad. So I hope that maybe even if you can't relate to this particular dynamic, you can relate to the moment. If I'm playing this dynamic backwards, it feels real yucky and all kinds of crazy stuff can happen. And if I can actually just switch back into resting, I see this happen for myself. I get frustrated that I'm a worse mom when I imagine that my kids are bullying me and pushing me around and that I have to do whatever they say. That really makes me resentful and angry. But if I can rest back and, hey, well, I'm actually really the one in charge here. And it's actually my job to care for those who are less able than me. And I love them and I want them to have a nice time. And also I want to maintain my own boundaries. I don't want to do things that violate myself. I'm certainly not going to do that. I'm in charge. So none of that's going to happen. And then I rest in that when my kid asks me something, I can say yes or no. And you know what? I'm so empowered in my dom role with my kids that I can say no to them. And then they can say something to me that makes me go, huh, you know what? Actually, let's just go for it. And I don't feel like they're bossing me around. Do you know what I mean? If I just can more consciously feel myself as the one that is calling the shots and making these choices and has the reins, then suddenly I'm just dealing with children who obviously I need to care for them. And obviously they don't know what's going on. And obviously they're going to overstep. And obviously I'm not going to do that.
Well, and I also think as a parent, if my kid can convince me to change my mind about something, then I want to empower them and teach them to be persuasive. So I'm going to enable that. But even in my business, sometimes people will ask me for things and I'm just like, I'm so titillated that you're just like asking me so directly for this thing that I'm just going to give it to you. And it's not out of a place, like it's not the child dynamic. I'm not like, ooh, I'm proud of you. They're not my child, but I am just kind of like, okay, you just asked for what you wanted and now I want to give it to you.
Right. And you don't need to feel like that person is making a demand on you. I can certainly imagine that it's possible to have people emailing you in your business asking you for stuff to turn really sour and have you feel like these people just think they can take whatever they want from me and they're just so greedy and all they don't even know my struggles and they don't know what I need. You could get into that mind state of disempowerment and letting yourself feel
Right.
at
And
the
I think
behest of.
yeah, and I think that is the exact kind of mindset that we were talking about before that can happen if you are not capable, if you don't realize your own power and also authority, and also that you are the one that has to hold your own boundaries, because then you think that you have to give everything that people ask you for. Only when you understand that you have the authority to say no to people and that you can do that with loving kindness, which does require you to be on the more empowered triangle, right? You understand that saying no is not being a perpetrator. It's actually just holding your boundaries. It's actually being honest. It's actually kind. And when you understand that, you can even deliver it with more kindness because you're doing it from a genuine place of love. Like, thanks, I appreciate your request, but that doesn't work for me. Exactly. And so then you don't feel victimized by people asking for things.
And then you don't accidentally become a perpetrator because you don't accidentally lash out and be like, no, and I can't believe that you would even consider asking me. You don't shame someone else for their behavior. You're just like, okay, interaction not compatible. Moving on. It's just like a molecular situation that doesn't work. Totally. I love that. And as you were talking about the saying no thing, it really occurred to me that it's important to mention that in the Dom sub dynamic, everyone, to play that game in a fun way, everyone has to be able to say no. Everybody, top to bottom, has to be able to say no. And I think that part of the shadow power dynamics is when the Dom thinks that they are somebody who nobody can say no to. Also, if a sub thinks that nobody can say no to them, then both of those are dysfunctional. So everybody has to be able to say no for maximum health. Anyway, are there any other, do we want to give any other examples? I just want to give real life examples of the shadowy dynamics that might be going on.
You were in a good one and I interrupted it. And
talking about the step parent kind of coming in and seeing a kid who's maybe a little big for their britches and just interpreting them as overstepping, when I think oftentimes there's parenting differences and cultural differences from family to family, and that also contributes. But I think a lot of what those cultural norms of parent children dynamics is about how are the power dynamics between parents and children expressed.
Yeah. And it is fascinating, just a little example of this from my own life. My mom was very strict and intense and scary. And I did what my mom said. I listened to my mom. And I was pretty well behaved for both my parents and also kind of sneaky. But my mom, I respected her. And it's not to say that I didn't respect my dad, but the few times that my dad ever yelled at me, I would just laugh at him. I just laugh and just be like, ha, you're so funny when you're mad, and that's just how they're holding that power dynamic. And I'm obviously a child, a sub in both of those relationships, and yet behaving completely differently. And this is where these dynamics, there is no one way that any of this needs to look. And it is very fluid, where sometimes it can change from interaction to interaction, especially with people who are sort of closer to us. With our boss, it's not really going to shift, right? Usually. And if there is a shift and we try to Dom our boss, that could be really bad. Or I don't know what that could have consequences potentially. They could be really good. They could be not good. But sometimes forcing sort of a false dynamic can actually rupture a relationship in a major way. And that's something, yeah, I'm trying to think of a good example of that. But I do think that the boss example is a good one.
Yeah, I mean, I can well imagine that certainly within the realm of the hierarchy of a business, and there's also going to be differences in like the business culture from one company to the next, but generally speaking, your boss is in charge. And again, can be a good boss or a boss who extracts from those underneath them, or a boss that protects and uplifts and mentors and encourages. Whatever. In any case, that dynamic is there. But I can well imagine a scenario where you go out for drinks or go to meet each other in a social setting. And right, it could go one way or the other if suddenly you find yourself in a position where you're the referee of the rec team volleyball game, or you're at pub quiz and you seem to know a lot more about this than your boss does. And like managing that power dynamic, depending upon how your boss is, how healthy they are, how healthy you are, managing all of that conflict, or what do I want to say, interference patterns in this is my boss and this is me, but now we're in a different context, and how am I going to respond and how are they going to respond? And that I can well imagine that that's rife for conflict or a lot of illumination, and skillfully navigating it and being aware of what's going on, I think is certainly helpful, you know? So paying attention to how your boss occupies the powerful role could help you to know how they might react to feeling differently, feeling in a different role than that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Personally think one of the most unsuspecting power moves in power dynamics is when, instead of trying to flip the power dynamic in a situation where you maybe feel somebody is more powerful than you or bullying you or whatever, just consciously taking on, this I think is part of existential kink, consciously accepting the role that you're in that dynamic, but with like the conscious choice to play it well, instead of reject it or be ashamed of it or fight against it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because a lot of, and you kind of referenced this just briefly earlier, a lot of times what can come up, especially when we start to actually look at these things, is if we have beliefs or ideas about DOMs being bad, authority bad, then we can feel really uncomfortable having authority. We can feel really uncomfortable in dom roles, and if we're not like accepting those roles, and we're not like choosing them, and we're not playing them consciously, we can end up in those sort of murky dynamics where we're not having good boundaries and we're not making empowered decisions, and we're sort of in a way that that's actually shitty for whoever the sub is in that dynamic too, because it puts them in an uncomfortable position of having to navigate around our boundaries. It just really challenges relationships when we have beliefs that we don't, or things that make us feel like we don't want to be in that role, or we're not comfortable in that role. And the truth is that we're all DOMs in some situations, and we're all subs in some situations. There is no, you have so many different relationships with so many different people in your life. Even if you're a hermit, I'm pretty much a hermit, and I have 5 kids. So I have 5 little subs right there. But then I also have my parents. And that's interesting because my parents, I was their sub, and I feel like things have shifted as I've gotten older, definitely. And I have a brother, and I have friends. I have Layla. I have my husband, and partnerships and marriages have interesting power dynamics. And actually playing into those roles and playing with those in your primary partnership can be really helpful if there is conflict around, if there is some unconscious like stuff coming up. With my husband and I, we both dom and sub each other all the time, but it's really a back and forth. And some marriages might have more stable roles, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's no right way to do it. And so whatever sort of position that you've sort of fallen into in these relationships, yeah, going back to what Layla says, it's really helpful to just own that, and play that role with just sort of, I don't know what the word is.
Willingness.
Yeah, willingness. That's the exact word. Play that role with
Yeah.
willingness.
Yeah. And I think it helps to be clear about what the more empowered versions are. So if you are already the sub, then, and what am I trying to say here? Sometimes I think the dom sub dynamic gets a little confusing because when we really understand the healthy cycle of it, then who's in charge is really not actually clear at all. But everyone's being taken care of and everyone's being served. It's enriching. It's an enriching spiral. Shoot, I'm trying to get back on what I was trying to say here. The empowerment, right? So it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to even choose which version you should play because you might be confused about who's the dom and who's a sub in a dynamic because you might be playing them in a kind of crooked backwards way already. But what I'm really trying to get at is playing with gusto and playing with empowerment and choosing to acknowledge the fact of a power dynamic and not struggle against it is the best way to either heal it and settle it and calm it or flip it into a way that actually then feels more healed and soothed and calmed because it's more appropriate. So to me, I just really notice that, for example, I've coached people in settings where their boss is kind of needy and demanding and micromanagey and anxious and uppity. Okay. And that's their boss. So that person is, higher in the hierarchy of their business. However, they're actually acting rather, in my opinion, like a sub, someone who has a lot of needs and wants those needs to be taken care of by someone else. So that, to me, that's subby behavior. And there's nothing wrong with that. I personally love to have my needs taken care of by other people when I'm open to it, when I can allow myself, then yes, it's wonderful. I love it. Okay. So it's annoying to have a boss that, especially when you feel that person is in charge of you and has power over your career and your money and your life and a lot of your time. And so it can be frustrating to just be like this, I have to do whatever this person says and they're, my boss. One way I have dealt with that for people or suggested that people deal with that is a more accurate way to say it is to take on the idea that actually your boss is a sweet little baby who has a lot of needs. They're actually a little sensitive squish who just really needs your help. And if you in your own mind can see that, okay, this poor person, I can hear but they should be, but what they're supposed to be better because okay, yeah, great. That's the kind of thinking that has been making you miserable. Try taking on the idea that I really need to take care of this little guy. Just in your own mind and heart. And my job is to be, you need a different page here. Okay, you want it this now. All right, got it, sweetie. I mean, don't say that out loud, then you'll get in trouble. But just taking on the caring of that person can really make those dynamics feel a lot less yucky. Because I don't know, it just does. For me, I've seen it work for a lot of people of just just saying willingly, I'm in this dynamic with this person. I do need to take care of them. I do need to do what they say. Okay. But instead of feeling put upon, I'm just going to try and, care for this person and give them what they're asking for like a good dom. And so instead of feeling like the put upon sub of a nasty, bratty dom bully, I'm going to be the caring dom of this little, needy person, of this needy person who needs me. And that's my job. That's what I'm getting paid to do. So I get a paycheck for that, and that's, and I just see that it doesn't have to remain that way. I often see that these dynamics then heal and greater understanding of what's going on happens and more clarity or people are like, wow, I actually really hate that and it makes me sick and I need to quit this job because I cannot deal with this person at all. No way of dealing with them is okay for me. In some way it spirals on and it evolves, but that can be a really good first, just adjustment to get things moving again is re-examining your participation, your conscious participation in a power dynamic.
Yeah, and I love this because it also illustrates there is this kind of way that they kind of fold into each other because the dom is taking care of the sub who's taking care of the dom who's taking care of the sub, and this is extremely oversimplified, but you can see from this example how that kind of works. And so, you can some people enjoy being a sort of difficult sub, right? Some people they want to talk back and be kind of bratty and just resist being told what to do. And
Or they want to be difficult to please.
Yeah, or
That's,
they wanna
I
be
think that's
difficult.
difficult to please.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, that's a big one. And those are sort of like ways that we can play the sub role that makes it, let's say, more difficult for the dom. And sometimes it's fun to like play that role like that. And if you if you want to like make the relationship easier, then you can be more like, a willing participant, be more willing to be pleased. Because there's also this like nitpicky thing that people do with each other where and this can happen on both sides. And so it's like holding appreciation first is a big thing, and that is part of this like being pleased thing is like just having expressing appreciation and genuinely feeling appreciation and finding things to be appreciative of really in both roles can make each role so much easier, but it's hard to do that if you're not even recognizing that those roles are even happening. So that is sort of the first step is like notice as you go through your life, notice these roles, notice like how you are engaging in these dynamics with people. And then
Yeah, I just wanted to say that if you're really interested in this topic and you want to go deep, we really recommend the new topping book and the new bottoming book. I forget the author of those books. Lucy's
there's
going to look it up.
multiple authors and
There's
hold
multiple
on.
authors. We really liked the new topping and the new topping and the new bottoming book, because they're very clear on the like healthy versions and unhealthy versions. And even though it is talking in a kink setting where there's, more like a agreed upon scene and agreed upon activities, the books are not like too lurid to read. And you can definitely take real life applications from those books on how these dynamics work out, even if you're not in, strictly consenting, laid out scenes in a kink world.
Yeah, so it's the Dossie Eaton and Janet Hardy. And yeah, I agree. It's really helpful to yeah, they're specifically talking about that world, but kink is happening all the time. And part of the whole pretense for like existential kink is that we sort of are the subs of reality itself. Like we are in a relationship with existence where we are the sub. And we can choose in our lives to be in a like appreciative, grateful sub stance with reality, or we can constantly be fighting and in conflict and in friction with reality. And the path of existential kink is to like treat our life like a kinky ass game with
Where we
our
trust the sub.
the dom, where we
I'm
trust the
sorry, yeah, where
dom.
we trust the dom. Where we trust
Yeah.
the dom. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then allow ourselves to get off on all of these kinky ass scenes that we're doing. Um so yeah, like these books are really good because they talk about it and you can map all of this onto everyday life, and you can even map it on to, I guess what we're talking about is a spiritual level of like this is what existence is. And so we're reality's sub. How can we like make the best out of being the most like just turned on, excited, grateful sub ever?
Exactly.
Because that feels good. That
Yes.
feels good.
That does feel good. I know. I'm thinking about it right now. Yeah, and the reason I mentioned those books as you were talking is because if you really feel in listening to this, brief, fun conversation, intro conversation, if you are getting the sense that like, ooh, wow, these power dynamics are playing out in my life and I am not being in full conscious participation and I got stuff going on, and you really want to be able to look at your own participation in it and really get clear on like how exactly and what exactly am I doing, reading those books can be very helpful to just give good examples of
Yeah.
what it looks like. Those archetypes. Basically give examples of the archetypes.
Yeah, and also in the books they talk about kind of like setting rules and setting boundaries and having kind of like, there's like the classic safe word and things like that. But I think that again, like mapping this on to real world relationships, most of our relationships, we have unspoken agreements with people that we're in relationship with. And, something that I learned a lot about when I was learning about like polyamory is like you can come up with whatever agreements you want in your relationships, and it can actually be incredibly healthy to like verbally establish, certainly in certain relationships, not in every it would be weird to do it in every relationship, but particularly in like primary partnerships and business relationships and things like that, it's actually really good, it's actually really helpful to have like written agreements and contracts and established boundaries and expectations. And um this is something that they talk about a lot in these books, and I think it's a really important thing in kink because you're going to be going into territories where you need to have understandings. You need to kind of know like what is a no for somebody and what is a yes and when is it too much for them. You need to be able to communicate all of that in a really effective way. And everybody kind of needs to be on the same page about what the expectations are and what the nature of the relationship is. But that applies so much outside of the bedroom. And I think that, we often also, we get into kind of unconscious and unspoken agreements with ourselves about how we're going to behave. And we do that all the time about how things should be and how they ought to be. And this is where we get into conflict because we can be in relationships where we think that the other person should do this, this, and this because that's my beliefs about what a boss should do. That's my beliefs about how a friend needs to show up for me. But they might not necessarily have those beliefs. So sometimes even just having the conversation, even if it is more casual, just like, what are your expectations around, what friendship looks like, or what are your expectations for me in this kind of relationship that we're in, can really help like everybody get in alignment and be able to feel good. Like I think a lot of times we want to like not be so like formal. We want to be more like cool and chill and casual and boundaries, bad, scary, mean. But actually having those things makes it so much easier to be able to for everybody to um like know what's allowed, to have like set expectations. um it actually makes it way easier because how many times, I mean, I could really speak for myself, have I like, it's like I don't want to impose but I want to kind of talk about this thing but I don't, and it's like all this sort of like time wasted where if I just had solid agreements I wouldn't have to like overthink about how I'm going to interact with people. I think that's actually why I'm such a hermit. And maybe you can relate to this, dear listener. I think Layla probably not as much, but like I think I'm such a hermit because it is so much effort for me to interact with people because I am often so worried about like how I'm appearing, how if I'm imposing on them, how, did I say something stupid? Are they offended by that thing that I said that I'm now just like replaying in my mind and I'm so embarrassed by? It's just like we drive ourselves crazy. And this is where like I've just learned like just honest, open, vulnerable communication as much as you possibly can with anybody that you can, and then like really solid agreements. That's my TED talk on that. Sorry.
Amazing, Lucy. Well,
Layla, you're like, I can't
what?
relate to any of that because
Well, I was laughing. I was like, "Oh, it's so funny that Lucy said that I can't relate to whether I worry about people judging me or imposing on me." I mean, I do sometimes, but honestly, I think less than most people.
I
I
think
do.
like, yeah.
I honestly let people be themselves. I do not try and take care of people when I wouldn't need to be taken care of in the same situation. I don't know.
Well,
I don't.
yeah, and I really like I feel like I've learned so much from you in that regard, and I think this is part of like your presence can be so healing for people because you demonstrate in a really beautiful way like you and maybe you're not like perfect in this, but I really like obviously we've been friends for a really long time and I just see how you're really yourself and you just hold yourself and you're not like I don't see you like obsessing about like, oh my God, is that person offended by that thing that I said? And it's so healthy. It's just so healthy. But I know that a lot of people do that, and I don't do it nearly as much. Literally, since being friends with you, I feel like I've I've healed a lot, and this is why I say being around you is kind of permission, because there is this sort of enlightened factor of just, like, being present with yourself.
I wanted to say for people who are considering joining Dominion that this is a really important topic to me. And when we're in our calls in there, I'm happy to talk to people about it, because in my past, I have seen people don't like the word power. People seem to not power. Power has a really bad rap. Power is associated with a lot of violence and bad shit. And that's understandable, because a lot of the people who have been using power have been using it in a mean, bully-like way. But I think it's actually deeply important to me on a spiritual and political and just human level that we heal our relationship with power, because if we hate power, then the people who love power and are willing to abuse it will always have it. And the only way to get power away from the people who use it in a mean and bullying way is to love power so much that we don't want it to be abused in the hands of bullies. And we need to really feel comfortable being empowered, and we need to take up our share of power and feel very comfortable being around other people who are taking up their share of power, and that we all are just kind of rising together in a field of power where we're all participating, we're all contributing, we're all challenging, we're all coaching, we're all creating new stuff, and we are flowing together because we all know that we all have the right to exist and to create and to challenge and to have boundaries, and we all deserve to be here and we all deserve to feel empowered. And so this is a really important topic to me, and I would just love to see more people feeling really good about participating in power dynamics.
Yeah, I love this, and I totally agree. I was actually explaining the concept of reciprocity to my 12-year-old last night, and I was just explaining there's people who cheat, right? They like, cheat the system. They're called cheaters in game theory, and they want to take without giving back. And then there's reciprocity, where we're giving back. We're giving back what we're receiving, and it is a natural human inclination to want to have reciprocity, and also to track other people's reciprocity. Like that's sort of a innate human talent is, and that's why we're so obsessed with, like, gossip and all this stuff, because we want to identify who the cheaters are, and we want to make sure that everybody is reciprocating and giving back to the community. And the thing is that the people who've been in power have not been reciprocating because they don't have to, and they've been able to get away with it and take advantage and really cheat the system. I mean, they've set up the system so that it's not cheating according to our
Right.
laws and our rules, but in terms of reciprocity and, like, what we understand on a much more foundational level as humans, like just basic giving and taking, that's not happening, and that's why we're so angry. And I love this because, of course, it's so important that the people who are in power are like good doms. At a societal level, we want the people who are in power to be good doms, in the sense of doms who are taking care of us, doms who
Yes.
see it as their responsibility to usher in happiness and health and abundance for
Quality.
everybody. Yes,
Yep.
exactly. Equality and just all the things that we want.
Enrichment.
Exactly. And what we've been seeing is our power structures doing the exact opposite.
So it's no wonder that we hate power. You know, I hung out with a lot of people who wanted to change the world and really wanted to change the world, and they really hated power. It was a really bad word. And I just would really love to see that change. I would love to see more power in everyone,
Yeah. Yeah,
not less.
exactly. And power to people who, because the thing is that people who seek power are often the kinds of people, or people who win power. I kind of look, I mean, just not to get super political here, but I'm always sort of the stance that in order to make it to, like, the White House, I just kind of imagine that you have to step over so many dead bodies to get there. You have to be so hungry for power, and that is kind of not the type of people that we want as our leaders, whoever they are.
Only going to change that. I mean, to me, there's a malignancy that's happened where some people are so afraid of power power and they really don't want to have anything at all to do with it, that then they, are willing to give it to the people who are, I've got a perfect plan for what I'm going to do with all this power. And that's the only place where power comes from, is all I'm trying to say. The only power that other people have is the power that they have convinced others to give them. And whether that's through clever rhetoric and talking, or whether that's through violence, is, that depends on the length to which someone is willing to go to get the power. That's how much they want it. But that's the only place it comes from. I want to say power is a finite resource, but by that I mean that it exists in people and we can move it around so that some people have more and some people have less, but there is enough for everyone to have the same amount. And we all deserve probably more than we're getting. There's a power inequality in a major big way that we all know about. Everybody knows about that. And I really do believe that the only way that we're going to solve that problem and change socially is if spiritually we come to a greater degree of embrace of power and capacity in our own personal system for power.
Yeah. And of course, we're talking mostly about interpersonal power here. Um, and we could do a whole other episode on personal power.
I mean, they're definitely related.
They are. And I think that is, are there any last things that we want to talk about here, Layla?
We've done this topic I would love to hear questions from anybody who listens to this episode. And if there's a collection of things that need more talking about, we love to be inspired by our listeners. So feel free to share your questions or any departures for further conversation that you might like to see more conversation on.
Well, thank you so much. And we'll leave it at that.
Listeners,
thank you so much for listening to another episode of Penetrate Radio. I have a free guided existential kink practice. If you are somebody who is new to this work, if you're new to EK, if you haven't read the book, if you're just not a reader, or if you need a refresher, you can get this. You can download it right now for free and use it to learn how to do EK and just follow along as a guided practice. It is meant for beginners. So I just want to let you know that that's available, and you can find it at the link in the description. Also in the link in the description, you can find more information about our membership Dominion, a field of radical approval. Dominion is less than the cost of a single manicure each month, and it's just a wonderful place to do this work in community. We have seen time and time again that being witnessed and witnessing others in this work is wildly helpful and validating. The last thing I want to mention is that a lot of our guests talk about the coach certification program Penetrate that they went through with myself and Layla. I want to let you know that we are going to be offering that same program again in 2027, and you can find a wait list in that same link if you're interested in getting information about that when it becomes available. And I think this goes without saying, but if you see anyone else offering a program called Penetrate that is also a coach certification program related to this kind of work, that is absolutely not the same program that Layla and I have taught and that the people in this podcast are talking about when they talk about our coach certification program, Penetrate. So I just wanted to make that super clear. Layla and I share a lot of hard-won wisdom through that program. So if we're not the ones teaching it and offering it, then it is definitely not the same program. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Penetrate Radio, and I will see you in the next one. Ciao.